Welcome in, Browns fans. Spencer German, Anthony Moeglin with you to start off the Super Wildcard Weekend. The Browns get ready to visit the Houston Texans for the second time in just a matter of weeks here, looking to advance on the playoffs. And we'll have a ton of stuff breaking down the matchup, breaking down C.J. Stroud being active this time for this game and what all that means. But I kind of want to start with not an off the path of just talking X's and O's and that type of stuff for this game, and more like a what history says about the Browns' chances to make the playoffs. And it's interesting, Anthony. I wrote a piece over at BrownsDigest.com. You guys can find it there. And breaking down essentially the history of lower seeded teams. So obviously, we've only had a 14-team field where there's 7 seeds on both sides for a couple years now. But dating back to 1975, when you had 5 or 6 as your lower seeded teams on either side, starting with the AFC specifically, there's only been 10 teams that have been one of those lower seeds and actually advanced all the way through to the AFC Championship game. It kind of puts in context just how difficult of a path that has been over the course of history to get there. But I think it's worth noting as we go into this postseason and talk about how we think this Browns team has a chance to follow in similar footsteps as those 10 teams.
Yeah, no question about it. It's the path to get there is so hard. It's hard to begin with, right? It just playoff football is different. It's a different kind of football, and then add in the fact that you're going on the road every game. And you also wrote a piece about this the other day too. It's like the Browns have the second best record in all of the AFC, and they're going to have to go on the road to go make a run. Or actually, they would have had they beat the Bengals. So they've played well all year. Don't really get rewarded for it, and kind of get pinned in a really tough position. And before we even get into any of the matchup stuff, they're playing a really tough Houston team. But the point remains, they're going to have to go on the road into a tough playoff environment. But I guess on the silver lining side, and something that I'm excited about, is that the guy that they have playing quarterback is familiar in these situations. He's 5-0 he's 5-0 in wild card games. Joe Flacco, that is, and he's good in these types of environments on the road, kind of being the enemy. So that's one thing. Although the numbers in history don't really lend our direction, your quarterback kind of can change that, and we got a good one in Joe Flacco.
Yeah, I mean, I think Flacco certainly helps ease some of the pain, especially given how the season's played out at the quarterback position, and you finally have a guy you feel like has stabilized that spot specifically, and you pair that with a great defense, plus you throw in, and I mentioned this in the piece, like it almost feels like the Browns have this perfect recipe with the 3 big things that we're hitting on here: quarterback play, great defense, and just this belief within that locker room that no matter what comes their way, they can beat anybody on any given Sunday, any given Saturday, any given Monday, whatever the game might be. They feel good about their chances, and I think that's just a testament to how battle-tested they've been. So I do believe that they can make a run. It's just interesting to kind of see that perspective. And I'll sort of divulge this a little bit further, too, because 10 teams that have made it as lower seeds, so your 5 and 6 seeds that have made it to an AFC Championship game, only one has gone on to win the Super Bowl. That was the 2005 Pittsburgh Steelers, and only 2 AFC teams have even advanced on to the Super Bowl. You have to go back, other than that Steelers team, you have to go back to the 1985 New England Patriots to find the other one. And then if you go across the aisle to the NFC side of things, they actually have less lower seeds that have made it to the conference championship game. They only have 9 since 1975, but they have actually one more Super Bowl champion who has pulled it off. And those 2 are actually more recent as well for people in the recent memory banks of Super Bowls of lore. Of course, you have the famous 2007 New York Giants who knocked off the undefeated New England Patriots. And then the other one, at the expense of the Browns' biggest rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2010, you had the 6-seeded Green Bay Packers do it as well. So, again, minimal sort of the chances of getting there are difficult. But there's certainly been these teams over the course of history that have done it. And like I said, I feel pretty good about the idea that the Browns could potentially be in that same conversation, even though the road's going to be tough.
And think about the two of those teams you mentioned, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers of the early 2000s. What's the first thing that come to mind? It's not the 500-yard games by Ben Roethlisberger. It's that steel curtain defense, right? It's Troy Polamalu. It's those guys who just refuse to give up yards on the other side of the football. And then think about that New York Giants team, right? On the other side of the other side of the coin, when Eli Manning and the boys took down the undefeated Patriots, and it was like, hey, what's one of those calling cards? Wasn't an incredible offense, but it was a really good defense. Think about Michael Strahan and guys like that.
Well, and it seemed like with those Giants teams too, like Eli always rose to the occasion.
Yep.
Like those 2 playoff runs, like define his career almost. He played his best in those runs, and that's similar to Joe Flacco in his Super Bowl run in 2012. He played some of the best football of his career, maybe the best football of his career, en route to that Super Bowl championship and a Super Bowl MVP. And if he can replicate that, and you get that sort of confidence from him, and he limits the turnovers that we've seen, then I don't see why the Browns can't make a run with him and a great defense sort of anchoring you throughout this thing.
Yeah, you feel really good about that. And that's what it is, man. All year long, it's been the defense, right? The defense has kept this team together when we were playing with PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and things looked really bleak. And now that the offense has kind of picked up their side of the bargain, right now you feel like you have a really full team. And the 2 teams we talked about who made those runs, right? The Steelers in 2005 and then those Giants teams, their offenses were kind of holding them back, similar to how we felt earlier in the year. Well, if Cleveland can have even half of the offense that they've had in the past 5 weeks since Flacco's been here, you're going to feel really, really good about it. And what do playoff games come down to, right? Just as every other NFL game does, the final couple minutes. And your quarterback's been there, done that. He's played in a million playoff games and he's won a bunch of them. And on the flip side, especially like this week specifically, you're playing against a rookie who, yes, he's been fantastic and he certainly was deserving of the MVP conversations that he was in before getting hurt, but this is his first time in the playoffs. He's a cool cucumber, man. He'll come and he'll be ready to go, but you feel really good about your chances with the defense you have and the experience you have on the offensive side of the football too.
I also think too, and we've hit on this a couple of times in some of our post-game conversations and things, but the idea that the AFC bracket or side of the bracket isn't this, it doesn't feel like it's a gauntlet. Like there's years where you go in and like, okay, the Kansas City Chiefs are a juggernaut. If you get them, it's like, can you just for one game limit the damage and beat them? It doesn't feel like that this year with any of these teams. And the Ravens are probably the closest to that. But for a Browns team that's already beaten them once this year, and you feel good about like the idea that it's a division rival that pretty well, what they want to do. Plus they're getting 2 weeks here where they're basically not playing some of their key starters, and that could always come back to bite you in the butt. Maybe they start off sluggish, or if the offense isn't clicking, because it took a while for that offense to really find their rhythm this season. The Chiefs offense has a lot of flaws, and if you get in a close game with them, like you're probably going to lean Patrick Mahomes over Joe Flacco, but who's to say that the Browns can't pull one out against them? The only team that really I go in and I'm a little weary of that is the Bills, just because they're playing such good football right now. I shouldn't say that. They have flaws, but they're just a hot football team, and a lot of times it's about who gets hot at the right time of year. So like the Ravens and the Bills, the 2 teams are like maybe I'm a little bit weary of, but you still feel like you like the Browns' chances in any of those games. So I'm not looking at this AFC like fearing any of these opponents that they could potentially face, which I think also makes me, intrigued by the idea that they could become this next low seed to make a run.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say next, was that, match yourself up against any team in the AFC bracket. What do you think the line is, right, going into the game? Obviously, you're probably giving up a point or two to Baltimore just because they're hot. And then every other one, you're like, hey, the Browns could be favorites, if everyone's healthy. If you go in, all things considered, you probably are a little bit of an underdog in Buffalo. But everyone else, man, why not? Why can't this Browns team, make a run in this AFC playoff that feels wide open because there's so many good teams? I just think it's setting up really good for Cleveland. Yes, we would have loved to get maybe Jacksonville or Indianapolis in this first round, certainly. But hey, you got Houston. That's the opponent, right? The only one you care about right now is those Texans, and you go down, take care of business one at a time. And who knows? Why can't this season end in Las Vegas?
You brought it up earlier, and this will be our last sort of point to hit on here. Do you subscribe to the idea that sort of the story I wrote, where the playoffs should be almost reseeded when you get to this time of year? Because my feeling on it is the reward for winning your division should just be you make the playoffs. Like you're guaranteed a spot. So the 9-7 or the 9-8 rather, Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC, you get into the tournament, but you're the last seed because you have the worst record. That to me is what it should be. Like, you still get rewarded for winning your division, but I think that it should be reseeded because I think like the Browns they played. Think about the parameters surrounding them. They played in maybe the toughest division of football, still came away with 11 wins. Every team in that division finished with a winning record. You had all the injuries you had. Like, to me, they earned the right to be up there with the top teams in this conference. And unfortunately, they have to go on the road. And like I said, that's why history shows like those teams have to go on the road for that long stretch of a playoff run. It doesn't usually work in their favor.
It's funny. And I would add to that too, the opposing conference that the North played was the NFC West, which is arguably the second best conference in football. So there was no cakewalks anywhere. It's funny because it's a great point. Your story was awesome. I suggest everyone go check it out, but it never really affects you till you're in it. So for us, it was like, hey, everyone who's whining about that, just get off your high horse. You're in the playoffs. But now that we're kind of a victim of it, it's like, yeah, like, why don't they? Why don't they do it like the NBA, where it's like, hey, win your division, you're in, but it's all based off of your record, which I feel it should be. Browns would be a 3 seed with the way it is right now, and you'd feel pretty good about any team coming to Cleveland Browns Stadium. But
you're getting a home playoff game.
Everything.
Yeah. I think we're on to something here. Hopefully the NFL listens to us when they vote on the rules this spring. All right, well, that'll do it, guys. Like I said, we're going to be popping on some combination of myself, Anthony, Brendan throughout the week, giving you guys some information, some storylines, some topics of discussion as we count you down, inch closer and closer, of course, to Super Wildcard Weekend. Browns opening it up with that big game at the Houston Texans on Saturday night, 4:30 kickoff on NBC and, of course, Peacock if you so choose to watch it there. But, it's a big week for the Browns out in Berea. We'll have you covered, as always, on the Browns Digest YouTube page and, of course, at brownsdigest.com.